Hello, Read 585. The purpose of this screencast is to give you some feedback on the Turning Tree scenario that was recently completed. I just got done scoring those and putting your feedback into Titanium, but thought you might like to see how your responses compare to peers, as well as give you some of my thoughts and share some of the peer comments that I thought most relevant. So this is our SurveyMonkey page, and the nice thing is when I pull your responses, I can do summaries, trends, as well as see individual responses. So we're going to look at the question summaries. Here's question 1, evaluate the way the school team identified students' needs in reading comprehension. So you can see on our scale of 1 to 5, our class average is about a 2.5, right? So if I go down here, it actually tells me the breakdown. So 3 of you, 15% said a 1, 8 of you said 42% or a 2. I'm sorry, 8 of you or 42% said 2, vice versa, and you can see. So nobody said a 5, which is positive because that's definitely not a 5. And over here, our average, rating for this question was a 2.5. So my response would be a 2, so I agree with the majority here and wanted to pull some comments that kind of give some insight as to what the difficulty was in the decision-making process. So as John says, the partially assembled team found consensus among 10 teachers that students struggle with comprehension of extended text and have difficulty retelling stories. While teachers might start by making generalizations about what they are experiencing with students in the classroom, this is problematic on a number of levels. Most of all, little reflection here with actual data, qualitative or quantitative. Formative and summative assessment data was hardly used to help form any action plan. Additionally, student artifacts that could help guide discussion and reflection were not consulted. Walpole and McKenna, great citation of source, note that the reading specialists and literacy coaches must assist teachers in interpreting the data they have collected. So, a few tricky things here is not even all of the teachers were represented, which actually Dana points out here, but they started with let's read Dana's comment. First of all, why was the focus only on grades 3 through 6? Reading intervention should occur as soon as a gap in achievement is first evident. Since third grade had the lowest scores, perhaps intervention in first and second grade needs to take place. That's a great point. The decision to address reading comprehension was made solely on teacher observation. Assessment and data were completely absent from the decision-making process. While teacher observation is valuable, the school did not use any kind of screening assessment to determine comprehension to be the biggest literacy need in grades 3 through 6. Likewise, they failed to use any form of diagnostic testing to determine which students had gaps in reading comprehension. So as you can see, the basis of this decision was not grounded in data at all. And this is a huge decision that's going to drive all of the intervention and professional learning happening at the school site. So you really need to do your due diligence and make sure that the focus area you're selecting as a school team is in fact the true area of need. So they really just started with the state data to say, okay, reading is problematic. And then teachers just kind of threw in casual comments. And again, not all of the 3 through 6th grade teachers were even present. And then what's going on in K1 and 2? They didn't have a voice in this at all, and they could shed some insight too. So for these reasons, I would give question 1 a 2. All right, moving on to question 2, evaluate the basis for the decision to adopt repeated reading as an intervention. So here, most of you, our overall ranking was about a 2. Most people were in the 1-2 range. I would actually go more towards the 1 side of things. So let's see what you all had to say. From Carrie, repeated reading is not a strategy used to aid in reading comprehension. So we're still unsure if reading comprehension is the need, but let's say reading comprehension is what these students really need. Well, repeated reading does not do anything to service reading comprehension. It is used for oral reading fluency, which the team had stated that the students did well in. So actually, this is a detrimental, and this is why I gave it a 1, is because, it's detrimental to create an intervention designed around something the students supposedly don't have any difficulty with. That's not going to help them. It is not clear in the article, but did the teachers even suggest that strategy? The reading specialist should not have suggested a strategy in which the team did not suggest. This action is counterproductive in team building and buy-in that the reading specialist is trying to achieve by having the team give suggestions. If this was the case, it is likely that the team felt that their time had been wasted in the first activity. Reading specialists should have chosen 1 or 2 of the most common comprehension strategies that the team had given, et cetera, et cetera. Harmony, the reading specialist did not have any data or research to back up her claim that repeated reading was a successful intervention. So repeated reading does have research behind it, but again, as an oral reading fluency, but this reading specialist did not pull any of that support. She was merely relying on, the grapevine that it was effective in improving reading scores at another school. But as Harmony points out, did this other school even have a similar student population? Because that could impact the results. I also feel that the reading coach quickly came to the conclusion to try repeated reading to appease the principal. She should have clearly set a definition of what area needs improvement, such as vocabulary knowledge. Coaches should not design any professional development without first establishing a broad description of their school-wide program. Great point there, right? We need to first all come together on what is effective reading instruction, because it doesn't sound like there is a consensus amongst teachers about that to begin with. And then lastly, Menya says the team decided to use repeated reading primarily due to anecdotal evidence from a neighboring school and ease of use. There was no research-driven decision-making that fueled the adoption of this practice, nor was there an action plan for program rollout put into place. Walpole and McKenna identify the literacy specialist as a curriculum expert and researcher. Good point. So the reading specialist in this scenario should have spent the time researching this specific problem and choosing a set of intervention options for teachers. So I believe that repeated reading is not really going to further the need of comprehension instruction, and in that way it is detrimental. And then also, this reading specialist didn't really drive any sort of, research or deep look at what might be best for this specific student population. All right, moving on to question 3, which was evaluate the reading specialist's decision to directly support staff members who are feeling frustrated in implementing the process. Looks like our average was 2.63, so kind of in the 2-3 range. I would go over here in the 2 range. Let's see what you all had to say. And again, I respect that there are different opinions out there. My response is not the end-all be-all. A lot of you had great justification for your answers, but ultimately poor decision-making is going on so far with questions 1 through 3. Marissa says, it is great that the reading specialist was willing to serve teachers who are feeling overwhelmed. However, it seemed more like she was offering to do the work for them rather than actually supporting them in adopting the program. The words sole responsibility were used as she explained that she would train the students. Support does not mean doing the work for teachers, but rather professional development systems include cycles of theory, demonstration, practice, and feedback. It would be more beneficial and effective if she were to train the teachers in the nuts and bolts of the program than provide the teachers with the observations and feedback once they launch. So basically, she is creating a dependency on her by doing all of the work, is not empowering the teachers. And, as a result, that's going to kind of hinder buy-in and investment from the teachers. And she isn't coaching them. She isn't building their skills or their knowledge by doing this. Danica points out, if teachers are not asked to take responsibility for implementing the process, the implementation will be ineffective. There needs to be accountability, not just brainstorming. While she should help them with questions, she should not be doing the work for them. So I believe that this was poor decision making, and I would give it a 2. Question 4, was evaluate the reading specialist's decisions not to challenge teacher decision making in a public meeting. And so our average on this question was a 2. So in this, somewhat ineffective range. And I think a lot of people got hung up on the word challenge, which kind of has a negative connotation. And obviously, we don't want to be coming down on teachers in a public setting, but you should be, addressing things as your colleagues brought up. Tamara has a great response to this. In the review meeting 8 weeks after the first monthly meeting, the teachers say they don't agree with the data because they see gains themselves. The RS does not step in to guide the meeting, nor does she talk about using the data to drive instruction. She is concerned that the teachers will trust her, and she doesn't want to put them on the spot in a public meeting. The RS was not skilled in dealing with conflict. Conflict is not necessarily bad. Great point. Handled properly, conflict can lead to discussion, collaboration, and breakthrough. Walpole and McKenna state data can sometimes be disheartening. You must be prepared to engage teachers in understanding what the data mean and in problem solving around the weaknesses they reveal. The RS had an opportunity to lead the conversation back to the data, and she missed that opportunity. Had the RS guided the discussion back to the data, they might see that while reading accuracy was improving, students still weren't making gains in the area that the intervention was meant to address. It didn't improve student response to text. And actually, this could have been a really valuable conversation had she structured it well, because they would have come to the realization that, students are improving in their oral reading fluency, which is what we're observing, but they're not improving in comprehension. And why is that? Because our intervention has nothing to do with comprehension. Heather points out the RS needs to have some authority within the group. I completely agree. The RS needs to use her experience to make the decisions that are best for the students. She should redirect the teachers and state that they need to keep a uniform way of tracking the students' progress to determine the effectiveness of the program's implementation. So as many of you commented, the RS isn't very assertive. She isn't very well prepared for these conversations. She's kind of like wishy-washy. She needs to be a little more authoritative in her role as a leader at the school site. Okay, next question. Evaluate the conversations around the use of data in staff meetings. So our overall average is a 1.5 for this question. I agree with the majority again and would score this as a 1. Let's see what all of you said. Marina, it does not seem like there really was any conversation about the data, which I agree. Most teachers did not reflect on the actual formative assessments, but on observations. There was no grouping of students who didn't meet the standard or talk of Tier 2 intervention. Instead, the teachers seem to dismiss the data and say that they see the growth and they disagree with the data. So going back to what Tamara said, you need to prepare them for that harsh reality and have that conversation, right? Data can sometimes be disheartening, but you have to prepare teachers to engage in those discussions. Instead, the teachers seem to dismiss that data and say that they see the growth and they disagree with the data. And the reading specialist doesn't direct the conversation into a productive way, basically missed a big opportunity there. And then Jip Fong has a really great point here about running records and how they're very informative and helpful. If teachers do not understand running records, they obviously need more training on those. If they feel a student could have underperformed on a running record one day, the teacher should be encouraged to try a second one at the same level. Allowing teachers to undermine techniques and assessments that have been proven to be effective will create a culture of anti-scientific testing at the school. And I think that is another good point, right? There wasn't a lot of training or knowledge building happening on the intervention or the assessment tools. Had teachers been, more invested and involved in the process, maybe they would see the utility behind them. But as we talked about before, they need to be trained in the purpose of the assessment, how to administer, and then also how to interpret and use that data. All right, let's move on to question 6. Which was evaluate the use of Fontes and Pinnell benchmark levels to provide information on the effectiveness of the intervention. And actually, this question had a 2.84 average. So most people kind of in the 2, 3, 4 range. And I believe that this is one of the best decisions that they did probably make for some reasons that your peers commented on. So I would actually give this one a 3. Many of you were not familiar with this assessment and did some research on it. So I was impressed that you really looked into it. But I think Tamara hit the nail on the head when she says, the staff suggested using Fountas and Pinnell as a way to assess if the repeated reading program is helpful. She is not familiar. However, she looked it up. It focuses on accuracy, fluency, and comprehension, which is true. So it is, in fact, going to measure comprehension, which is what they want to see progress in. There is a way to code grade their responses according to a rubric, then yes, this would be a good way to assess the comprehension part of the intervention. While F&P is not the program used in the intervention, it is assessing whether or not the intervention is effective. One reason I scored this section with a 4 is that Turning True teachers are already familiar with Fountas and Pinnell, and it is already integrated into the classroom. And while we don't want to just select assessments because we're already using them, this actually is a good assessment because it measures oral reading fluency and comprehension, which covers what their intervention is targeted at, oral reading, as well as what their intervention should be focused on, comprehension. So for that reason, it is a good assessment to use. They're trained in it. They know how to implement it. Using an assessment system that teachers already know is connecting to the nuts and bolts of the program, yada, yada. So this is one of the better decisions that did get made. Again, it's hard to tell if a lot of forethought was put into this decision or if we just did what was easiest because we need to move forward and get a plan to our principal ASAP. All right, question 7, evaluate the group's reflective focus on the ongoing quality of instruction in the classroom. This was one of the lower rated questions with a 1.63. I agree again with the majority and would give this a 1. And you guys had some great comments on this. Avelia says teachers consistently take data and discussions personally. This is a huge problem. I agree. Gotta build that trusting culture. As this is not about themselves, it's about their students and the literacy needs. By ignoring the data, they can't discuss possible best practices or which comprehension skills are being taught in the class that are doing well. They should be learning from each other, but instead are just worried about how they look, which is evidenced by their denial. Lastly, by the end, they don't even meet or discuss the data. Basically, they're not reflecting in a productive, healthy way. Grace also says, during the initial meeting, some teachers appear defensive when discussing possible improvements and say loudly that they are doing the best they can. At the end of the meeting, teachers appear to be more results-driven and happy that accuracy is improving, rather than remaining concerned that the students are still not responding to text. They say they outright disagree. So not a reflective practices happening here. And, could it be that, the reading specialist is contributing to that type of culture by not, calling out this, behavior and preparing them? She just doesn't seem very prepared to have these conversations around the data. So had those been better prepared, maybe they could be reflective. All right, moving on. Question 8, we have reading specialist communication style with teachers in the meeting process. Majority of you said a 2. I agree and would also give this a 2. Our average was about a 2 as well. What did you all have to say? Elena, she gives them far too much autonomy from the start. I've already said this. She should anticipate some resistance, but obviously doesn't want to upset the teachers or ruffle their feathers, but it backfires on her when they modify the program. It's respectable that she's trying to maintain, a healthy, friendly relationship, but being friends is not the point of someone in an authority position. She needs to lead with more authority. I agree. And then Sarah says the reading specialist does not appear to have control or the trust of the teachers. The group could have decided to meet again and table the discussion. In Fisher and Fry's case study, this happened as well. The issue of modeling and scaffolding could not be resolved, and the task force agreed to meet for a day and focus on this topic alone. Don't delay the meeting like the group did and then skip a month and instead schedule another one sooner for specific topics. So communication, very poor there. All right, question 9, almost through these. Evaluate the identification of teacher professional learning goals related to student needs. This one should be pretty clear that it is a 1 because there are not actually any teacher goals present. As Holly says, I'm not sure if I missed something, but I didn't see any teacher professional learning goals. Maybe this is the issue. Professional development is key in allowing teachers to feel comfortable and competent in implementing a new program. This should have been available and occurring on the calendar. The scenario didn't discuss if teachers met to discuss things they wanted/needed to learn in order to implement the intervention. PLCs and trainings are necessary to aid implementation and assessment so teachers can learn how to interpret the data of the new program. Teachers must be trained. Felicia says, in this case study, the focus of the reading specialist is the student need. There is no discussion of how teachers were prepared for implementation of this program. And how they were prepared was she did a lot of the work for them. Good comment here, citation, professional support for all adults who work with children in a school is the key to pulling a program together. She doesn't have a plan to assess, which teachers will need additional training or support in order to implement. This certainly contributes to the scattered nature of how the program is being practiced in different classes. So, as many of you said, the implementation of the program is very inconsistent. People are doing it at different times and in different ways, probably because they weren't properly trained in that. And then the last question, evaluate the school leadership team's involvement in the change process and reflection. Our overall ranking for this was a 1.74. Majority of you between a 1 and a 2. I would probably give it a 1, but I could see it going either way here. Isa says, the school leadership team shows real concern for their students, but their involvement in the change process and reflection shows a lack of knowledge and teamwork. To me, this is a devastating prospect in this scenario. They know what is wrong, but they don't know what to do or how to solve the problem. A lot of their actions and motivations are contradictory. It is critical that they need something, but they're missing leadership and motivation. And then as Ellen points out, it was disappointing to read that the reading specialist seems to have been put to task to make the changes with the teaching staff alone. The most effective changes will only come about when everyone is collaborating and working toward the same goal, teachers and administrators alike. Walpole and McKenna remind us that a truly school-wide professional support system will have extensive contextual support from the administration because administrators will be scheduling it, participating in it, and supporting the work of the coach. And then in this scenario, that is not happening. So for that reason, I would give it a 1 because administration is not involved at all. And not even the whole school team is involved. And many of you commented on the possibility of setting up kind of an instructional leadership team, as we've read about in case studies, also a great idea. So that there can truly be some shared leadership around this because the way the reading specialist is running things is not effective. So there you have it. A look at, kind of how we as a class ranked the Turning Tree School on all of these different indicators, as well as, some rationale behind that. So feel free to compare your results to these and kind of norm yourself against our work as a class. So great work overall on this. And hang in there. We've just got a few more weeks left as we wrap up with our unit on coaching.